I'm Candy Spangler, GS owner, rider, coach, and two-time US Women's GS Trophy Team finalist. This is the third of a multi-video series to talk about the skills you need to qualify for the GS Trophy. And this is where the real fun begins, because today we're going to get into advanced slow-speed maneuvering, specifically figure eights and the famed garage. So far, we've focused on balance drills and basic slow-speed maneuvering drills. Once you've mastered those, then it's time to crank things up and start bringing those skills together to execute technical, full lock-to-lock turns in uneven terrain. So let's get started. Much like the slow-speed maneuvering videos suggested, start this drill in a parking lot where I have maximum traction and a smooth surface. Then I move into the dirt. I even used this covered horse arena back in 2019 to start practicing in the dirt when there was still snow and ice on the ground. So let's talk about what the course is, and then we'll talk about how to ride it. Start with the figure eights at 20-foot diameters, or wider if you need it, with a 4-foot gate at the middle. An easy way to set this course up is with a 10-foot string tied to a nail. Then I drive the nail into the ground to set the first circle with the cones. The outside cone in the middle of the circle will mark the outside gate. Then measure 4 foot towards the first circle to mark the other side of the gate. And therefore, the center of the second circle can come out from there. For the garage, start with these dimensions. I bought a measuring wheel like this one to lay out the course. Measuring tape would work fine too. To mark the borders, you can use cones, but it would take a lot of them. Otherwise, use loose chalk, or like I did, use orange fluorescent flagging tape and attach a small piece of Gorilla Tape, at least in 3 different spots. And then I pounded a long screw through the tape and into the ground. The screw will allow it to grip to the dirt, keeping the tape safely secured to the ground. But it also allowed me to reuse that tape and pull it out of the ground. Once you've mastered these dimensions, then you can start walking them in until you get closer to these dimensions. Now let's talk about how to ride these courses. This can be broken down into 3 basic components that I like to call EPB. EPB refers to environment, pilot, and bike. Environment is the terrain, and for these maneuvers, you'll want to use all the space provided. Pilot is you, and how you want to use proper body position on the bike. This is especially critical for your head and eyes. The bike is mastering your bike's controls: power, clutch, brakes, handlebars, and suspension. All right, so analyzing the environment may sound easy, but trust me when I say this. You'll have to constantly remind yourself to use the entire course. Give yourself as much space as possible to execute all of the turns. Often in the GS Trophy, perfect execution and position of your first turn determines your ability to execute all the subsequent turns. This is especially true in the garage. Okay, now let's talk about you as the pilot. This refers to body position, and for these 2 courses, you'll be doing a lot of counterbalancing. But what exactly does that mean? It means your entire body needs to move into a position that will allow the bike to enter a tight, controlled, full lock, leaned in turn, and then quickly reposition yourself on the bike into a position that will allow for the same turn in the opposite direction. So let's talk about feet first. I like to pick up my feet because the grippy foot pegs, and then turn them into the direction of the upcoming turn before I even get to the turn. Once your feet are turned, you're in a position to comfortably turn your body as you enter the turn. The goal is to put your weight far to the outside of the turn to counter the weight of the bike leaning into the turn. Yes, the bike needs to lean into the turn in order for it to turn as tight as possible. So don't fight the lean just because you're going slow. This is why counterbalancing is so important. As a short rider on a Boxer GS, I get good leverage on the outside of the bike by placing my knee into the top rear corner of the cylinder head. It's another contact point for me to control the bike. And as an added bonus, it's easier on my knees. Otherwise, if you're taller, you may want to consider pushing your outside knee into the tank to help lean it in. The next thing you need to think about is position of your upper body. This is where most people struggle. The tip or phrase that helped me is draw the bow. Think of a hunter drawing his or her bow on a target, which is in the center of the turn. Your inside arm should be straight and pointed towards the center of the circle, and the outside arm is bent up and in line with your straight arm, like you're drawing a bow. This forces the upper body to the outside of the turn and also forces you to let the bike lean in. When you let it lean in and your body is in the correct position, you'll often find the inside foot can't even remain on the foot peg. For short riders like myself, or those who weigh very little, it's even more imperative to situate yourself far outside of the turn to counter the weight of the bike leaning into the turn. As you can see here, the calf of my straightened leg is on the top of my saddle because my body is so far to the outside of the turn. This, of course, also means I lose access to the rear brake in a right-hand turn. Finally, and likely more important than anything else, is turning your head and eyes into the turn. There's a lot of elements to a good turn, but this one I find to be the most critical to a good tight turn. The third and final component of advanced slow-speed maneuvering is bike control. This is more than just good clutch control. This is really more about mastering all of the controls on your bike and understanding how each input can change the bike's physical characteristics and capabilities. For instance, did you know that the more you lean the bike in, the tighter it can turn because you have in essence changed the circumference of the wheel because you're using the sidewall versus the center of the wheel. And that to stay upright, when using that same sidewall, you'll need to counterbalance and use centrifugal force to balance the weight of the bike acting to the inside of the turn. The good news is you do not need to become a physics major to become a good rider, but you do need to be patient with yourself as you practice these courses and the finessing required of both you and your bike to get to competition level. I've dropped my bike hundreds of times, if not thousands, practicing these maneuvers because there's a very fine line between mastery and dropping the bike. And you will find that line with consistent practice and yes, many drop bikes. But that's what my crash bars are for. Friends, I hope you know the reason I'm making these videos is not to become famous. If that were my goal, I picked the wrong subject. I'm doing these videos because I love being able to master these machines and use them to their fullest potential out in the world. The truth is, every adventure rider should be practicing these maneuvers and taking the time to train on their machines because you'll end up enjoying your adventures so much more. So get out there, train, take a class or a clinic every year. Never stop learning. And for those of you training for the next GS Trophy, don't forget to take lots of videos of yourself to analyze later. That's all for this episode. Stay tuned for the next episode to learn how you can qualify for the GS Trophy. Take care and keep the greasy side down.